The silent zone in the vastness of space. There are places where the light from stars barely reaches and silence reigns, but even in the deepest parts of the galaxy, there are whispers of Earth, a small blue planet that no one dares to approach. Kale, a young alien scientist from the planet Torin, had heard the stories the galaxy's oldest species, those who had traveled to the farthest reaches of the cosmos, refused to go near Earth. No one knew why. The elders spoke of it in hushed tones, warning their young not to venture close. And yet Kale was curious. With his bright eyes full of ambition, Kale had always been drawn to the unknown. He didn't believe in superstition or ancient tales. To him, the truth was something that could be discovered through science, through exploration. And so he gathered a small crew of explorers determined to uncover the mystery of Earth's silence. Their ship, the Vanguard, was a marvel of technology designed to navigate through the most dangerous parts of space. It was equipped with the latest advancements, including hyperdrive engines, cloaking shields, and sensors that could detect even the faintest signs of life. Kel's crew trusted the ship, and more importantly, they trusted their captain. But as they entered the solar system, things began to feel off. Kale said his second-in-command, a seasoned officer with years of deep space travel experience, were nearing the outer edge of Earth's orbit. Sensors are picking up strange anomalies. Kale glanced at the control panel, his brow furrowing. The readings on the screen were unlike anything he had ever seen. There were disruptions in the fabric of space-time, small rippling waves of energy that distorted reality itself. What kind of anomaly? Kale asked, his voice steady, but his pulse quickening. It's hard to explain, Ricker replied. It's almost like a barrier, an invisible wall, and it's affecting our systems. We're losing power. Kale nodded. He had heard rumors of such things, strange forces surrounding Earth that even the most advanced species couldn't fully comprehend. But he had never believed them. He had thought it was just fear, superstition, passed down from one generation to the next. This is what we came for, Kale said, determination in his eyes. We need to push forward. We can't turn back now. The crew was uneasy, but none of them dared to challenge Kale. They were explorers after all, not cowards. The Vanguard pushed on, its engines humming as they neared Earth's orbit. But as they got closer, things only grew stranger. The anomalies were intensifying, and the ship's power was beginning to fluctuate wildly. Lights flickered, and alarms blared in warning. We can't keep going like this, said her voice tinged with concern. Kel, we need to turn back. But Kale was fixated on the planet ahead. He could see it now, the blue and green orb that had so many secrets. He had to know the truth, the stories about Earth, about the galaxy's oldest species refusing to go near it. It had to mean something that no one was telling him. I won't stop now, Kale said firmly. We're close. We need to find out what's happening here. The Vanguard continued its course, approaching the atmosphere. Suddenly, the ship was rocked by a violent tremor. The instruments went haywire, and the ship's hull groaned under the strain. Kale, we need to get out of here, shouted, her voice filled with panic. Before Kale could respond, the communication system flickered on. A distorted voice filled the cabin, sending chills down every crew member's spine. Leave now, before it wakes up. The voice wasn't clear, but it was unmistakable, a warning from something far older and more powerful than anything they had ever encountered. The crew exchanged nervous glances. Kel's heart raced. Who was that voice, and why did it sound so familiar? Did anyone else hear that? Kale asked, his voice hoarse. Nodded, her face pale. It came through the comms, but there was no signal, no known source. The voice echoed in Cal's mind, as if it were trying to reach deep within him. It wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. Something out there on Earth, perhaps beneath it, had noticed them. The lights on the Vanguard flickered once more, and the ship systems began to fail. Kel gripped the control panel, his fingers trembling. The stars outside the viewport began to distort, shifting and swirling in a pattern he could not understand. Something's wrong, Kale muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, throwing the crew members to the floor. The ship's engine sputtered, and the once clear view of Earth became a swirling mess of colors and lights. It was as if reality itself was being torn apart. Get us out of here, screamed, her voice panicked. Kale, we need to leave now. But it was too late. The Vanguard was no longer in control. The ship groaned and buckled, as if something was pulling it in. A deep bone rattling hum filled the cabin, and Kel's vision began to blur. The world outside the viewport was no longer recognizable, and the stars, those distant beacons of hope, seemed to vanish into nothingness. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The ship was still, the hum faded, the stars returned to their proper places in the sky, but Earth was no longer visible. It was gone. Kel's breath caught in his throat. The ship systems flickered back to life, and the crew scrambled to their stations, eyes wide with fear and disbelief. The message from the voice, leave before it wakes up, still echoed in Cal's mind. Earth was there, but it wasn't. Something was preventing them from seeing it. Something was keeping them away. And now Cal knew the galaxy's oldest species weren't avoiding Earth out of fear of its people. They were avoiding Earth because of something far more terrifying. Something on Earth had awakened. Silence filled the Vanguard's bridge. Every crew member sat frozen, staring at the empty void, where Earth had been just moments before. The blue and green planet, so clear in their sensors, was simply gone. Cal's fingers hovered over the control panel, His mind struggled to make sense of what he was seeing. This is impossible, he muttered. His second in command, swallowed hard. Did we move? Maybe we were pulled into some kind of spatial distortion. Kale shook his head. No, the stars are in the same position. We haven't moved. It's Earth that vanished. The tension in the air thickened. The Vanguard sensors kept scanning, searching for any trace of the missing planet. But nothing came up. The system reported an empty void, where Earth should have been. No gravity, no radiation, no signals, like it had never existed. This doesn't make sense, said her voice. Unsteady planets don't just disappear. Then the lights flickered again. A low vibrating hum filled the cabin, sending chills down everyone's spine. The sound wasn't coming from the ship, it was coming from outside. Kale turned to the comms officer. Are we picking up anything? The officer, a younger recruit named Vil, tapped frantically at her controls. There's no signal, no radio waves, no transmissions at all, she said. But what Kale demanded? Vil hesitated before whispering it. Feels like something is watching us. Kel's pulse quickened. He wanted to dismiss it as paranoia, but deep inside he felt it too, a presence, an awareness, something ancient, something far beyond his own understanding. Then without warning an alarm blared. Incoming OBGC high VLO site. Rick's eyes widened as she shouted, brace for impact. The Vanguard lurched violently as an unseen force slammed into it. Kale was thrown against the control panel, his vision swimming. Sparks erupted from the ship's main frame as warning lights flashed across the dashboard. We're being pulled, Vale screamed. Kale forced himself up and looked at the viewports, but there was nothing, just endless darkness where Earth had been. And yet something was dragging them forward. Engage reverse thrusters, he ordered. Tried. But the ship didn't respond. It's not working. We're caught in something. It's not gravity. It's something else. Kale gritted his teeth. The ship was moving, but he couldn't tell where. His instinct screamed they were heading toward something. And then the void blinked for a fraction of a second. The darkness outside shifted, revealing something underneath. Not empty space, not a missing planet, but a structure. It was massive, bigger than anything Kel had ever seen, stretching far beyond the ship's sensors. A massive, unnatural construct, hidden beneath the illusion of nothingness. Then the voice returned. You were warned. It wasn't coming from the comms, it was inside their heads. Ancient, layered, like thousands of voices speaking at once. Vil screamed. Clutched the controls, her knuckles white. Kale barely breathed. The Vanguard kept moving forward, dragged deeper into the unknown. The structure was waiting. And now there was no turning back. The Vanguard tumbled through the void, dragged toward the colossal structure, hidden beneath the illusion of emptiness. Kale clutched the edges of his seat, his knuckles white. The ship's stabilizers strained against the unknown force. Nothing could stop their descent. Engines are dead, shouted over the blaring alarms. Whatever this thing is, it's pulling us in. Kale barely heard her. His mind was racing. He had heard stories, whispers among the elder races about a silent zone in this part of the galaxy. A place even the oldest species refused to approach. They claimed that those who entered never returned. No one had ever mentioned Earth was part of it. Captain Vil choked out, her voice trembling. Look. Scanners. Kale turned toward the main display. His stomach twisted. The readings made no sense. They were still in the SAL system. Yet the ship's instruments insisted they had crossed into another space. Entirely, the fabric of reality itself had changed. Then the Vanguard slowed, the force pulling them in released its grip. The alarms silenced. The ship floated eerily still. And then they saw it through the viewport. Past the illusion of nothingness, an enormous gate loomed before them. It wasn't made of metal or stone. It was something else, something ancient. Dark lines pulsed across its surface, shifting like veins filled with liquid starlight. This isn't natural. DECLOVSIDCR, whispered Kale, exhaled sharply. No, it's not. The gate was open beyond its space, rippled like a dark ocean, shifting in ways his mind refused to comprehend. It was a passage, a doorway to somewhere else. And it was waiting for them. A deep vibration ran through the Vanguard. Not an attack, not a weapon, an invitation. Then the voice returned. You have come too far. The sound reverberated in their skulls. Thousands of voices layered upon each other, ageless, indifferent. A warning wrapped in finality. Vale gripped her console, her breathing ragged. Captain, what do we do? Kale stared into the shifting void beyond the gate. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to flee, but Earth was still missing, and whatever truth lay ahead they were already part of it. He tightened his jaw. We go in. The ship trembled as the engines restarted without their input. The Vanguard was no longer in their control. It belonged to something else now. And as it crossed the threshold of the gate, the stars behind them faded to black. The Vanguard drifted past the enormous gate, swallowed by the shifting void beyond. The moment they crossed the threshold, the universe outside ceased to exist. No stars, no planets, no familiar markers of space. It was as if they had entered a place untouched by time itself. Kale gripped the armrest of his chair, his muscles tense. Report, he ordered, though he wasn't sure what he expected. R's fingers flew across the control panel. Scanners aren't picking up anything, she said, her voice tight. No radiation, no gravitational fields, no background cosmic noise. It's like we're in a void separate from reality. Cal turned to Vale. Cal's. She shook her head. Nothing, even the emergency beacon isn't transmitting. She swallowed. Where alone a deep resonant vibration pulsed through the ship, making the metal groan. It wasn't an attack, it was something deeper, like the space around them was breathing. Then the lights flickered. Captain Ra's voice cut through the silence. Something's happening to the ship. Kale turned to the viewport and felt his stomach drop. The Vanguard was moving forward, but not because of the engines. They weren't flying anymore. They were sinking. The space beyond the gate had no up or down, but Kel could feel it, a pull dragging them into something unseen. The void rippled, shifting like liquid shadow, and then it opened. A vast structure emerged from the darkness. It had no defined shape, no clear architecture. It was built of something that wasn't quite metal, wasn't quite stone. The surface pulsed with dark veins of energy, shifting, rearranging, as though the structure was alive. This isn't a ship," R whispered. "It's something else." Kale stared at it, a chill running down his spine. "A construct," he muttered, "older than anything we've ever seen." The Vanguard continued its descent, drawn toward a massive circular opening in the construct surface. A docking port? Or a MTH? "This isn't right, Vil," said her voice, barely a whisper. "We shouldn't be here." Kale wanted to agree. Every part of him screamed to fight, to escape. But there was no way out. The ship was no longer there to command. The moment they crossed into the structure, the darkness outside sealed behind them, cutting them off from the void. The ship lurched, coming to a sudden halt in the middle of an enormous chamber. And then the lights turned on. A deep red glow filled the chamber, revealing the scale of what surrounded them. Walls, curved, unnaturally covered in intricate markings that seemed to shift when Kel wasn't looking directly at them. Symbols, patterns, alien in design, but unsettlingly familiar. The ship's hull vibrated as a low hum filled the air. Then the voice returned. "You do not belong." It wasn't a warning. This time it was a judgment. And suddenly the ship wasn't empty anymore. A shape moved in the darkness outside the viewport. Then another and another. Tall, light, watching. Their bodies weren't solid, shadows wrapped in light, shifting like figures caught between dimensions. Their eyes, if they had them, gleamed with something ancient. One of them stepped forward, approaching the viewport. It raised a single elongated hand, if it was a hand at all. Cal's breath caught in his throat. The ship responded. The controls flickered to life on their own displays. Flashed symbols, too fast to read. The ship systems were being rewritten, altered in ways Kale didn't understand. Captain R said through clenched teeth, "I don't think we're in control anymore." The Vanguard shuddered as something outside began to change. The chamber itself opened, revealing the deeper darkness. Beyond them, the figures spoke, not in words, in thoughts. Kale felt them pressing against his mind, against the minds of everyone on board. Not an invasion, an examination. And then for the first time, he understood. The galaxy's oldest species didn't fear Earth. Because of humans, they feared what was buried beneath it. Something older than their empires, older than their gods, something waiting. And now the Vanguard had awoken. It. Kale struggled to breathe as an overwhelming presence filled his mind. It wasn't just a voice, it was a force pressing against the edges of his thoughts like a storm bar held back. The ship shuddered again, its systems flashing erratic warnings. The strange beings outside the viewport watched, unmoving, as if waiting for something. Then the voice spoke once more. "You are not the first." Kel's body tensed. Not the first. The meaning settled over him, like a weight. Others had come, before others had reached this place. And none had returned. Ri's voice broke through the suffocating silence. "Captain, something's happening beneath." As Kale turned to the holo display, where a faint energy signature pulsed from deep below the structure. Whatever was down there, it wasn't just old, it was awakening. The figures outside the viewport moved for the first time. They did not drift. They did not glide. They simply shifted from one place to another, as though time itself bent around them. Then the ship plummeted downward. The force dragging them wasn't gravity, it was something else. The walls around them peeled away, revealing vast spiraling corridors that twisted in impossible directions. The deeper they went, the more Kale felt like reality itself was breaking apart. His ears rang with something that wasn't sound, a frequency beyond hearing. The voice returned, buried, chained, forgotten, but never gone. A massive chamber opened before them. It was unlike anything Kel had ever seen. Enormous pillars of black stone, inscribed with symbols that hurt to look at, surrounded an immense sphere. At the center, it was alive. Dark veins pulsed across its surface, beating in a rhythm that sent a deep resonance through the ship. It wasn't mechanical, it wasn't organic, it was something beyond either. A single rupture split across the sphere's surface. Something inside stirred. "RCK," gasped Captain, "this isn't a prison." Kale turned toward her. She swallowed hard, staring at the readings. "It's a W." The realization hit Kel like a shock wave. This was not an ancient ruin, it was a cradle, and something inside was about to be born. The figures outside the viewport raised their hands, their bodies shifting erratically. They weren't just watching anymore, they were praying. A deep guttural sound rumbled through the chamber. The sphere cracked open, and something looked back at them. The ship's systems flickered, fighting against the overwhelming presence that surged through the chamber. Kale gripped the armrest of his seat, his knuckles white. He couldn't look away from the sphere that had opened before them. The crack split wide, revealing something that couldn't be described by any language. It wasn't a creature, it wasn't a being, not in the way humans understood it. It was something far older, something that existed beyond time and space. A force that seemed to stretch across the very fabric of existence. Its form was fluid, ever-changing, now shadow, now light, now something in between. The vibration that shook the ship intensified, and Kale felt it deep in his bones. It was as though the entire structure was alive, the very walls pulsing with an energy that threatened to follow them whole, the ancient beings outside the viewport, the ones who had watched them. Since their arrival were no longer silent, their bodies flickered and shifted, their movements erratic. They were no longer observers, they were witnesses. Ra's voice trembled as she spoke, her hands moving frantically across the console. Captain, I can't. Stabilize the ship, we're losing control. The hull of the Vanguard creaked under the pressure, the metal groaning in protest. The dark figure in the sphere stirred an energy so intense that it felt like it was pulling the ship toward it. The systems were completely unresponsive. Now the ship's thrusters were useless, and even the emergency protocols were overridden. We're not going to survive this, Vil whispered, her voice barely audible. Cal's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the massive entity. The ancient things inside the sphere was waking up, and everything around them, the ship, the walls, the beings watching, was a part of it. He had no idea what it wanted or what it could do. He didn't even know if they would survive this moment. But one thing was certain, it had been waiting. Suddenly, the ancient beings outside the viewport spoke. They weren't speaking in words, but in thoughts pressing against Cal's mind. Like a heavyweight, the words weren't a warning, they weren't an explanation, they were begging. Do not release. The message echoed in Cal's mind, the words sharp and clear. He turned toward the viewport again, his breath catching in his throat. The sphere had fully opened now, and the thing inside was shifting. It was forming itself into something with structure, with purpose. Do not release it, R repeated, her voice filled with fear. But it was too late. The thing inside the sphere surged forward, a force of energy so powerful it seemed to be space itself. The ground beneath them shuddered. Walls of the chamber twisted in unnatural ways. The dark fluid form of the entity extended outward. And Cal realized it wasn't simply a shape, it was a consciousness, an ancient mind, awakening after eons of slumber. The ancient beings, the ones who had warned them, were now bowing. They were acknowledging the presence that was emerging. It was their creator, their master. The ship was now in its grasp. Cal could feel it, the way the structure vibrated, as though the very molecules of the Vanguard were being rearranged. It wasn't just pulling them, it was changing them. The figure inside the sphere grew larger, and Cal caught a glimpse of its form, too vast to fully comprehend. It had no defined features, no face. But there was an intelligence there, something that transcended all of creation. Its presence was an avalanche of power, of knowledge and darkness, pulling at Cal's very soul. It was never meant to be free, one of the ancient beings whispered, its voice harsh rasp that cut through the silence. You have released it, and now you will witness its wrath. Cal felt the weight of those words like a fist in his chest. He had no idea what they had unleashed. But the presence that filled the chamber wasn't just ancient, it was unstoppable. The entity was awakening, and it was hungry. A voice not of the ancient beings, but of the entity itself, reached out into Kel's mind. It wasn't a sound, it was a feeling, a terrifying surge of dark power. And hunger, I am the end of all things, the voice whispered. And now you will see the beginning of the end. The ship was already beginning to break apart. The walls cracked under the pressure of the entity's presence. The hum of the engines was replaced by a deepening roar, a noise that tore through the ship, rattling every part of it. Kel's body screamed for him to run, but there was nowhere to go. The ship was doomed. They were all doomed. The entity had awoken, and nothing would survive its wrath. But then, through the darkness and the fear, one thought remained clear. Earth in the distance. In the back of his mind, Kel remembered the reason they had come here. They had come to uncover the secrets of Earth, the mysteries hidden deep beneath its surface. But now Kel understood Earth wasn't just a place. The Vanguard groaned as the entity's presence twisted reality around them. The ship was no longer just shaking. It was dissolving. Panels, warped metal, stretched and tore apart like paper, and the air itself felt wrong. It wasn't just the ship that was being destroyed. They were being rewritten. Cal fought against the overwhelming force pressing against him. His breath was ragged, his vision blurry. But his mind clung to a single terrifying realization. This thing had been imprisoned for a reason, and now it was free. The ancient beings outside the viewport remained bowed, their bodies flickering like shadows caught between dimensions. They were terrified, but not of the entity. No, their fear was directed elsewhere, at Earth. Kel's heart pounded as understanding struck him like a thunderclap. The oldest species in the galaxy hadn't avoided Earth because they feared humans. No, they feared what was hidden beneath the surface. Earth wasn't just a planet, it was a prison. The entity shifted its massive form, stretching across the chamber. It had no face, no features, yet Cal felt it staring at him, watching, testing. You have come far, the voice echoed in his mind. Deeper than the void itself, and now you will know why they ran. The space around them ripped open, a vision raw and violent poured into Cal's mind. He saw ancient wars, entire civilizations, erased with the thought the entity had ruled before time itself, a force beyond gods, beyond death. It had no rival, no weakness, except when it had been sealed not by aliens, not by the Council, but by something far worse, by humans, not the humans of today. Fragile species that thought themselves new to the stars. No, these were the first ones, the ones who had walked the galaxy before history itself. They had built the impossible, wielded technology that defied reality. And when they had defeated this entity, They had bound it beneath their home world, but they hadn't survived. They had vanished, wiped from existence, leaving only their prison behind. And now Kale and his crew had opened the door. The entity moved, the ship buckled. Kale felt his body pull apart, atoms unraveling, when suddenly, the pressure stopped, a pulse, a tremor, a shift in the universe itself. Something answered from deep beneath Earth's surface. From the ruins of the civilization long forgotten, a second presence awakened. And it was not pleased. The ancient beings outside the ship collapsed, their forms breaking apart as they vanished into dust. They had feared this moment for eons, and now it was here. The sky above Earth ripped open, revealing something hidden for millennia, a structure massive, impossible, buried beneath the planet's crust, a weapon. The entity hesitated for the first time. The mind that had ruled the void felt fear, because the ones who had locked it away were not gone. They had simply been waiting. The ship shattered, the vision ended. And Kale saw in his final moment the truth. The galaxy had refused to face. Humans were never the ones to be feared. Earth itself was.